All right.
All right.
Welcome to Action and Inertia, a research podcast designed to explore human behavior in response to change. I am your host, Kimberly Logan. I am a change leader and the creator of this podcast. I am obsessed with how people relate to change. I have a passion for witnessing realized human potential. And I'm interested in what motivates folks to action. I'm a Master of Science with a concentration in creativity and innovation. I'm a subject matter expert in grants management. I'm an artist, and I really just hope that this podcast can inspire at least one person to actively lean into change. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today is our inaugural episode 1 of the podcast. And so I have my dear friend, Desiree Presley on today. And we're gonna do a little reverse. She's actually gonna interview me today. So we could set the stage for the show and just kind of explain how the research is gonna work, what we wanna accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. Desi, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and interview me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to you so you can ask your questions and we can hopefully set the stage for folks to let them know what we're going to be doing over here at Action and Inertia.
Awesome. So check one, Kim, you already inspired somebody. I'm here, I'm doing this. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen with the podcast. So let's just jump right into it. I want the people to know more about you. I know you, but I want them to know more about you. Who is Kim? What's your passions? What's your sign? Where you grow up? Tell us about yourself.
So what's your age? What's your sign? So I'm a Sagittarius. Okay? Shout out to all the Sagittarians out there. And like I mentioned, like most people, I have many passions. Right. But the thing that keeps me up at night is how can we actually achieve world peace?
Yeah.
There's got to be like a solution to this. Because I think somewhere in my mind, I really just believe that each of us are here and each of us have these different talents and they can all contribute to that ultimate end goal in a really idealistic sense. I might even say that's each of our purpose is to live our lives out authentically, and that in doing so, that is our contribution to balancing, like the world and finding peace collectively and individually. So that's what keeps me up at night, and that's how we ended up here on the podcast. This initially started with an idea of consulting and coaching. And as I was kind of moving through, different methods, tools that I could offer to clients as I'm coaching them through change management, I just found that I was consistently curious about other people's opinions about this, because it's not really a typical conversation, right? Like you and I have been friends for years and years and years. We talk about everything. And I don't think until the idea of this podcast came up, we ever talked about this, right? So I'm really hoping that we can just kind of create a community and a conversation and just a database of information that can help people train for change.
Right. So why change? Why is change the thing that's pushing you to learn about?
Because, like Octavia Butler, shout out to Octavia Butler, one of the greatest to ever do it. Like Octavia Butler says, right? Change is God. Change is it. Change is the only constant that we can really rely on, right? Everything must change except change. Change itself is the common thread, I think. In our human existence. I think, we're all having all of these different human experiences, but we can all share that high or low or in between, it's gonna change.
So
right.
were you doing it mainly like, okay, I want to start this off because I'm making these big changes in my life. What is motivating me to change? And this is so good for me in my life that I want to let other people know that they can make these changes and give them these tools to make these changes.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I think, I've experienced a lot of change in my life.
Mhm.
So I have experienced changes in environment a number of times. So as you know, I was born in Jamaica, grew up in Jamaica, but when I was about 7, I was born in Manchester, which is like a more farm town, rural countryside kind of town.
Mhm.
When I was 7, we then moved to the city, to Kingston. So that was like a huge change. Um, and then I moved to America and lived in Jersey right around like the middle of high school.
Mhm.
A few years later, moved to Philly for college, right? And I just think all of kind of that, all of those successive changes in
Mhm.
a way gave me an advantage to like training for it, right?
Right. So did you handle it well or did you not handle it well? How did you train? Was it a good training or
Um,
no?
I think it depends on which day you ask.
Yeah.
I think it depends on which day you ask. I
Yeah.
think, I think sometimes I handle it well, and some parts of it I handle well, and others not so
Not
much
so much.
because, all of these are really complex experiences, and there's so much that goes in it. It's like it sounds very simplistic. I'm like, I moved here, I changed like primary caregivers every time I did that. Like my whole world kind of went. You remember those glasses we used
Those
to
little
have?
goggles that'll switch.
Yeah, and you had the little
Yes.
thing on it. It
Yes,
was
yes,
like
it
that.
did. Yeah.
So it was
It
like,
happens really fast. Yeah.
right. So you're just kind of switching and it's like NC and here's a new C. Um, so of course that was difficult,
Mhm.
especially, I mean, and sometimes I think about it like, I think I realized it was difficult when I became an adult and was kind of like reckoning with my childhood as we do.
Yeah.
But as it was happening, um, I was just a resilient kid, like most kids
Right.
are. You kind of just go with the flow. Um, so yeah, so definitely from my experience, and um, just I think I've always had like a really active approach to change naturally. I'm like a big dreamer,
Yeah.
so I'll like picture some crazy goal, and I'm like, all right,
Right.
I'm
I'm
gonna
going to
do
figure
this.
out how I'm going to
I'm
do
gonna figure
this.
out how to do this.
Right.
And then often requires changing a lot of things, like from the simplest thing to like what time I go to bed to what time I wake up, or jobs, or houses, like where I live, all kinds of crazy things. But I'm intense. And so
Right.
like I'm just committed to that dream if once I get my mind on it. But I think there's also another side of my inspiration too. And that is in um, observing people that I love or other people that
Mhm.
I encounter who
Right.
don't have that same
Yeah.
response,
Right.
right? Like they're
Right.
not having the same response I have. And that could be for a plethora of reasons, which leads us to this podcast because
Right.
I'm so genuinely curious about what's happening in that space. So like for a little bit of background for the podcast, I think the framework that I'm working off is this idea that I have that right, we agree that change is constant. I don't think
Mhm.
anybody would argue with that. And my observation anyway is that people seems to have like one of three responses, right? So
Okay.
either you're like me when I was a little kid, and you're just like blissfully unaware of like the
Of
fact that
what's changing going on.
change,
Mhm.
and you're just kind of like la la la, everything's I'm just going about my business, which is arguably the best place to
Right.
be.
Because you're just moving through the
Ignorance is
motions.
bliss,
Right.
right?
There's no resist.
Um, or you are aware of the change and you kind of like actively lean into it. Like I was saying about like having big goals and like you're kind of planning. So you're being like a little bit more proactive about it. And then there's that inert state where I think people are like actively aware,
Oh, absolutely.
but either just inert or even sometimes like actively
Resisting it.
you
Yeah.
know, which is also like a really interesting kind of response, I think.
Right.
And I think it's a spectrum, right? Like I think in my own experience, I've probably been at all of those stops, depending on what my perspective is at the time, or like what the change is, or maybe how much information I have about it. So I do think it's a spectrum, but I think overall, each of us has like a way that we generally approach change. That's maybe as a result, like a cumulative thing, like as a result of all of your experiences, you know, because then you can like trauma and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I'm just, yeah, so this podcast is really about having as many conversations as I can with as many people that I can to kind of explore this and then to record the data, right? So we can see over time, hopefully, commonalities along the spectrum, right? Like,
so how are you going to catalog this data? So, okay, I'm going in, I saw your podcast, I love it. I'm like, oh, I want to know how to get out of this relationship. I can't get out of this relationship. I'm in this bad relationship and I want to get out of it. Am I going to the database and typing in bad relationship, how to get out of it? Like, what am I doing to get my answers?
That's a really good idea. So stick a pin. We should maybe talk about that. That wasn't what I was thinking.
Okay.
I was thinking more in terms of kind of like the framework we just talked about and being able to like graph traits or tools or like different kind of methodologies that lends itself to each one. So so that a person that's approaching the data that we gather from the podcast can kind of look at a bucket that says, oh, you know, here's what the podcast has discovered about like people who are blissfully unaware of change. Here's usually like their state of mind. Here's usually like what's going on. Here are people who are inert, you know, here's what they've said about what they've experienced themselves or observed, you know, fear, trauma, you know, faith, you know, commitment to a particular goal. Like what is motivating you? So I'm hoping that we can catalog the interviews in that way. So that it can begin to create like a toolkit that you can kind of check into, right? To say, okay, like I'm aware of this change. I feel like I'm resisting, you know, maybe you can even check that area of the information and say, yep, check, definitely feeling that. And then maybe you can go to the action section and say, okay, here's 3 things
this is the way I need to do it.
Right? Like I can try this and see if it works for me. I think at the end of the day, I would like the result of this to be less about like individual instances of change and more about people just building like resilience to change in terms of like feeling empowered to like move through that. So really creating like your own kind of method for like how you're gonna approach change overall, right? So like, for example, one thing that I've done in my own life to kind of manage change is I've created a morning routine. Not a morning person, much rather stay up all night and sleep till noon. But I realized that, you know, I have all these big goals. I have 24 hours and my mind is most palpable in the morning, you know, if I'm just being honest with myself. And also that like if I take a little bit of time essentially to like take care of myself and like get centered and grounded and get really intentional about how I'm gonna live out my day, that I'm having a lot more success with like
Right.
agility as
Right.
like things get thrown my way. You know, like
Okay.
even now, if I skip my routine for like a couple days,
Mhm.
I begin to just feel more stressed at work or like, right, because I haven't taken that opportunity to say, okay,
To
like
get
I can't
settled, to
predict
balance.
what's
Yeah.
gonna happen exactly, but I can kind of decide how I'm gonna respond. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting because it makes me think, okay, when I'm going to the podcast, I want to see somebody who's in the same situation as me. So I don't want to hear someone whose routine may be better for them at night when I'm not a night person, I'm a morning person. Like, how are you going to track that? Like, okay, I'm a morning person. I like to get up and I like to drink my smoothie, eat my
Yeah.
breakfast. I want to know, I want to see the people who change that way because I know it's more relatable to me.
Yeah.
How are you going to track that in your podcast?
I'm not. I'm hoping that when you come to the show, you'll be interested in hearing each of the individual stories, which
Everyone. Okay.
will be rich because you know each individual has something to offer. And I think it's
Right.
less about you know, like exactly how you like how you design
Mhm.
you know, your thing, whether it's like you're a morning person or a night person, you journal before you go to that, I think is like the nitty gritty that each person's gonna have to decide because we're all different.
Right.
I think
Right.
I think what's more important to take away from the podcast is that there's all of these other people having the same human experience.
Right.
Maybe not the same exact change, maybe not, you know, so
Right.
it might be a relationship for one person, it might be a job for another person, it might be like personal growth for one person, but this will be a community where you can just um, check in on the shared human experience of like responding,
Responding to
right?
change.
Because I
Right.
think
Yeah.
to I don't know that we could drill it down. I mean, it's
Right.
so much.
Just I'm a human and I want to know how to do it. You know, social
Yeah.
media is here now. You can get on social media and learn how
Yeah.
to do anything. So people just want to know how. They want to skip everything and say, give me my answers. Give me my answers. And are we going to get some answers from this podcast? I'm sure we are.
Yeah, I think you're gonna get some answers on how to create your answers,
Right. Oh, I like
which
that.
is a lot
Yeah.
more, I think, valuable,
Yeah.
right? Because like you can teach a man to fish, he can eat all of his life, you know. You just give him the fish, he's gonna run out. I don't know, I
Right.
said that backwards.
But I
But
got
y'all
you.
know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Right? So hopefully this podcast will teach everyone how to fish instead of
Right.
just handing you fishes. I get it. I know social media, you know, it is what it is. That's not what we're doing over
Okay.
here. Yes, this is about empowering people to lean into their own strength, their own power, their own method, their own um, creativity, really, right? Like, because it's there. It's just sometimes a little bit challenging or scary to untangle if you don't feel like this is something that other people are going through.
Right. Sure. So where can we find this podcast? Where can we check you out?
Oh, yeah. So initially for right now, you know, I just wanted to get going. So we're gonna publish to YouTube. So the podcast will be available on YouTube for the next few weeks. Ultimately, my goal obviously is to make the podcast available everywhere where podcasts are available.
Mhm.
And I'll update, you know, the audience as we kind of work on that kind of distribution angle. But for right now, you can find the podcast on YouTube, and I will link all that information in the show notes. You know how you can access it. We'll have, you know, social media presence and all that, and I'll put all that in the show notes. Oh,
Awesome.
and it'll be every other Wednesday, so every 2
Okay.
weeks. So we'll, you know, we'll publish every other Wednesday. So
Okay.
that'll be a new. That's the goal. Okay.
You already have your lineup. You know, you got to interview me at some point.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was all the questions I had for you, Kim.
Oh. Um, can I ask you a question? I mean,
Sure. Why not?
forever the interviewer of the podcast being interviewed. But yeah, so considering our conversation, like, what do you think about the framework that I've kind of set out? And just the idea that it's not the show is not meant to um, you know, give you an exact recipe,
Right.
right? But rather to like teach you about the flavors of spices and fruits and vegetables so you can kind of create your own.
I like that because I'm constantly looking for somebody that I can, learn something from or someone that I can relate to, period. So if everybody on social media is putting on their best face and it seems like their life is perfect. And I want to hear someone that's going through some of the same things as me to see how they're doing. I may be doing it the wrong way, not the wrong way, but a different way.
Right.
And I want to hear other people's experiences so that I can make some changes to myself. So I love the framework of it. I love being able to go somewhere and to this catalog and find some different ways and hear other people's, experiences so that I can help to make myself a better person, really.
Hey,
I
shout
like it.
out. Shout out to that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and
I
interview
know.
me and introduce the show. I'm so
Yeah,
excited. We'll definitely have you back to
absolutely.
answer. Oh, before we log off, super important. Um, just to touch on a little bit of how the how it will work. Each week we're going to build on the two, let's call them research goals, which is one, to inspire at least one person to actively lean into change, and then two, kind of like a secondary goal is to record our findings so we can kind of begin to create this toolkit, if you want, right? The database that's going to be a toolkit. But how we're going to do that is we're going to ask each guest the same three questions.
Mm,
So for integrity of research, we're just going to ask the same exact three questions. So the questions are, in the face of change, what motivates a person to choose action or inertia, right? So that's one. Second, which choice is most beneficial to like a holistic wellness,
mhm.
right? And three, what traits exist in people who consistently choose action, right? So each guest will have the same three questions. They'll have an opportunity, obviously, to think about their responses. I'm hoping it will be anecdotal and conversational like we've had now. So kind of to get at your kind of desire and need to really connect individual experiences. This is something that I hope we will ultimately publish millions of interviews so we
Mhm.
can categorize it or catalog it by like subject matter expertise or experience or right. um, and so we can begin to see those trends. But I just wanted to add that's it's straight up.
Kim, I wanted you to talk about, I forgot to ask you this. So I wanted you to, when we were talking initially, you were like, you want other people to start doing these
Yes,
interviews
I
and
hope.
asking these
Yes.
same three questions. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as I'm dreaming of like where this will go in the
Hmm.
long run, I'm
Yeah.
hoping that the research can just expand and expand and expand, like the Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, right? Like I'm
Just bigger
hoping
and bigger
that
until it explodes, right?
he's getting bigger,
Yeah.
and adding to the database, adding to the toolkit. So it's my hope that we can add a few other dimensions to this.
Right.
One of those will be like an online survey for those who may not want to be interviewed, or hopefully we get to the point where we can't even interview everyone, so we can collect that information still,
Hmm.
add that to the database. And then ultimately that there can be hundreds, thousands of um, interviewers, right? Conducting this research. I really look at this as research, and it's just like the more data you can collect, the
The
better,
better.
right?
Right.
It's three questions. That's kind of a part of the design, is this idea that this can live beyond me, right? That this can become dinner conversation, that this
Mhm.
can become brunch conversation, that this can become, you know, just a conversation that like everyone is having as we're relating to each other.
Yeah.
And trying, because a large part of change is, you know, collaborating to kind of get
Right.
to the other side, especially when you get into like relationships and teamwork. So I that's my hope. Yeah, thanks, thanks for bringing that up. It's like so much. But yeah, so my hope is that it can be expanded, and you
Yeah.
know there can be tons of people doing this work to contribute to that database, because I think the more information we have there, the more robust of a toolkit we can provide. It's really just about um, how we can empower people by
Mhm.
training them for change. I don't think people really look at it like that. You know, you're just kind
Mhm.
of living your life, you know change is happening, but you know, this is like you can work this out like a
You can
muscle,
do it.
right? Like
Right. You can do it.
the more you kind of train your mind to this, even you
Mhm.
know, the minute you begin to think about this, you've already kind of, I think, stepped
Stepped in the
over the
right
direction,
direction.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like the more you can kind of engage with these interviews and engage with the data that we're collecting, is the more that you can kind of begin to build your own muscle for your own resilience to change and really feel empowered to create whatever design works for
Mhm.
you to kind of be efficient and successful, you know.
And you can. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
You know,
I'm excited.
shout out to everybody out here in the struggle.
Everybody is out here in the struggle. That's what it is. Everybody's out here in the struggle. This is going to be good for everybody. So tune in. Seriously,
Tune
tune in.
in, tune in. So yeah, thanks so much. Do we forget anything? I don't think
I mean,
so.
I would like to see you answer the 3 questions at some point.
Yes, at
'Cause
some point, I'm not going to answer them today because a part
no,
of me
not
says
today.
that the scientist in me is like, I don't want to mess with the research integrity. And
Mhm.
really,
Have you answered the questions
and
in
for
your like
myself,
have
yes,
you?
I've
Yeah.
answered the questions for myself, but you know, I think that, and I will add my perspective to the database, but I think
Right.
I want to begin with just a framework, not an opinion.
Right.
Because I really want everybody to feel that this is like really an open platform for like varied opinion. That's what we want. We want variety, right? So we
Right.
kind of we have more things to pick from, you know, as we each kind of begin to create our own workout for for training for change, right?
Mhm.
Like not everybody likes to run or do hit or whatever. Some people like to mix it up. So, you know, so it's kind of like the same way. It's really just about training your mind and then you know, pivoting or like organizing your choices and your actions to
Right.
move you in the direction of change. And I think that that's the empowering thing, is that then you'll begin to be proactive about change, right? Because life just comes at you, and there's so much that is reactive.
Right.
But just like if you're training like an athlete, right? When that thing pops up, if you've run this drill 1,000 times, when your shoelace is untied or like your whatever falls up, you're good. Like, you know, you
Right.
got
Because you're
run this,
prepared.
even if you only ran it through your mind, you know, that's even more powerful than the physical
It is.
iteration of it, right? So I think it's really about that. I hope that every time somebody comes to this podcast, that they can really have an opportunity to build that muscle just through
Yeah.
the
Just
shared
a
experience,
thought.
right?
Yeah.
Just through the shared
A
experience,
thought.
just through hearing your experience or another person's experience, you know, it'll begin to just build that resilience, build that muscle, build that sense of empowerment that like, hey, you know, it might not be the same exact change, but if so and so can do
Do
it,
it.
so can
Then I
I.
can do it.
Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of inertia is really just fear based. And the way to beat that is to really feel like you're a part of a community that's larger than your fear.
Right. Right. Or to just do it. Just do
Nike.
it.
Like
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not
Nike,
Android.
just do it.
Nike in this way.
Just stop
But
thinking
yeah,
about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Do it.
That's definitely the vibe, is to just um, Howard Thurman famously said, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask
Mhm.
yourself what makes you come alive and go do that.
Go do
Because what
that.
the world needs is people who have come alive. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's like one of my favorite quotes and just like a huge inspiration for me in life. Um, and I think that we're talking about action and inertia, and
Mhm.
action to me is that like coming alive, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Today, Mikhail said, I wish we could just do what we love to do every day. And I'm like, yeah, I wish we could just do what we love to do every day.
yeah,
And this will help with, change and working towards doing the things that you love to do instead of just doing the same
right. And
stuff
choosing
every
just
day.
like a small way to to
Yeah.
achieve
Move
that for yourself
towards.
now, right?
Exactly.
Because I think also that um we can plan and plan and plan,
Mhm.
right? But like what's a tiny thing that y'all can do now
Right.
that will literally answer that question in the affirmative for you? Like, you know
Seriously.
what? The next time a class says that, I'll say, we do XYZ every day, and that's
Right.
our dream,
Right.
and
Stop
so
writing
that's
those lists of dreams. I got like 20 lists of dreams and I need to start figuring out, oh, how can I actually
yeah, just
get
and a little bit, like really think about it uh like you're training, right? So you're not just gonna pop up and run a marathon,
no.
right? You're probably gonna wake up tomorrow and stretch.
Right.
It's the same thing with that list, right? So like what little piece of that can you begin to lean into?
Mhm.
Um, because the more you take a little bite and a little bite is the more you'll feel
Yeah.
certain that you can do it.
Do you have a list, Kim? Do you have a list that you
I
write
feel
your
like
goals down?
I am kind of, I'm a little like, I like to kind of like funnel things for clarity. So when I'm thinking about my goals, and I do this like Q3, because Q4 of the year, I just like to chill. My birthday's in December. I'm like, not
Mhm.
making any more
It's the end of the year. You're just like,
right?
okay.
Like I'm already set. By the time people come
Yeah.
around in New Year's, I don't do
Yeah.
resolutions. I don't do all that. But yes, I set goals for myself every year, every quarter, every month, every week, every day. Um, that, like I said, kind of like are funneled down, right? So uh, one of my goals was to kind of begin to work on this consultancy and coaching. And in the initial stages of that, I had no intention of doing a podcast. But as I kind of took a little bite at a time to figure out how I was going to do that and
Mhm.
where the need was, and as I was having conversations with folks, this was an idea that came out of that. So I think
Right.
like that's even in and of itself like a good example um, of the importance of just kind of like beginning, you
Okay.
know.
So while you're getting the data, are you still going to be doing the consulting or are you strictly going to focus on the research and the podcast
I
right now?
mean, yeah, I'll probably still be consulting because, like I said, I hope this becomes gargantuan. We get so much. So I hope that this is the beginning of something that literally lives in perpetuity. Really,
Mhm.
as a conversation, even if it leaves this platform of a podcast and it just begins to be a conversation, and these
Right.
3 questions can just be a guide, you know, I'm living the dream.
You live in the dream.
If
Okay.
just one person, but if 2 or 5 or
Or
100,
3 or a
you know,
million.
you know, maybe we can go on tour one day. Who knows?
Oh, that would be awesome.
Um, but yeah, so yeah. All right. I don't know how long we've been on here chatting, but I think we can wrap it up. Thank you so much again, Desi, for coming on. The great questions. This was so much of a better way to introduce the show than just me talking to the camera. So appreciate you. Yeah, thank you everybody for watching, listening. As mentioned, we'll be back next in 2 Wednesdays with Episode 2, secret guests. We're not gonna pre-announce our guests. And we'll begin to have the conversation, and answer these questions. I invite you to check out the show notes, like I said, for information on where and when to find us. And please contact us on the email in the show notes to let us know your responses. Or if you have suggestions or recommendations for people that you believe should be on the podcast that we should reach out to, because we would love to talk to everyone. So thanks again, Desi, and thank you everybody for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, can't find the